The following is an article in the publication, The Library of Celaeno, from September 11th, 2025. The title of the article is No One Can Stop What's Coming. The subtitle reads, It's Bigger Than Any of Us. It was written by Librarian of Celaeno. I should note that there are a number of excellent takes on this already, by such authors as Fisto Sabani, Konstantin von Hofmeister, Astral, William M. Briggs, Theophilus Chilton, Spaceman Spiff, and especially John Carter. Read them before you read this. Also, I concur with Carter's view that we should all watch the video of Charlie Kirk's assassination. This isn't prurience, it's facing reality squarely and essential to coming to terms with reality. Writing about the French Revolution, the great Savoyard noted that it was impossible to understand without considering the role played by Providence. Quote, "The most striking thing about the French Revolution is this overwhelming force that bends every obstacle. It is a whirlwind carrying along like light straw everything that human force has opposed to it. No one has hindered its course with impunity. Purity of motives has been able to make resistance honourable, but no more. And this jealous force, proceeding straight toward its goal, rejects equally Charette, Dumouriez, and Drouet. It has been correctly pointed out that the French Revolution leads men. More than men lead it. This observation is completely justified, and although it can be applied to all great revolutions more or less, it has never been more striking than it is in the present period. The very rascals who appear to lead the revolution are involved only as simple instruments, and as soon as they aspire to dominate it, they fall ignobly. Those who established the Republic did it without wanting to, and without knowing what they were doing. They were led to it by events. A prior design would not have succeeded. Robespierre, Collot, or Barrère never thought to establish the revolutionary government or the reign of terror. They were led to it imperceptibly by circumstances, and the like will never be seen again. These extremely mediocre men exercised over a guilty nation the most frightful despotism in history, and surely they were more surprised at their power than anyone else in the kingdom. But the very moment these detestable tyrants completed the measure of crime necessary to that phase of the revolution, a breath overthrew them. Their gigantic power, which had made France and Europe tremble, could not withstand the first attack. And as there could be nothing great, nothing august, in a completely criminal revolution, Providence willed that the first blow be struck by the Septembrists, in order that justice itself would be debased." End of quote. By now, you've all heard about the tragic murder of Charlie Kirk, shot on stage at one of his Prove Me Wrong shows at Utah Valley University. His death occasioned a huge outpouring of emotion, most thankfully positive, some, from the usual suspects, characteristically horrible. De Maistre came to mind because, as I scrolled through X and Substack and YouTube and various news sites, I couldn't help but reflect on his wisdom and find both comfort and foreboding in the knowledge that, ultimately, what will happen is out of our hands. The outlines are only dimly visible on a horizon that seems very distant, but which we approach at high speed. As of this writing, no confirmed suspect has been identified. Several people have been arrested, but so far as I can gather as of today, they've all been cleared and released. Others can speculate about motives as they choose. While I prefer, as always, to wait until information is more certain, I certainly have a pretty rough guess as to what the mugshot will look like. So does everyone else. And even if by some strange chance it turns out that the culprit was not one of the many leftists who wished him dead, those threats are still out there, and those who called for his death and who are now celebrating it are its co-authors. The media isn't spending much time theorizing about why Kirk was killed, since as far as they're concerned, Kirk's death was the obvious merited outcome of his wrongthink. The author included a YouTube clip of MSNBC analyst Matthew Dowd giving remarks during live coverage of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Quote, "He's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech, or sort of aimed at certain groups, and I always go back to, hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions. And I think that's the environment we're in. People just, you can't stop with these sort of awful thoughts you have, and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place." End of quote. Later in the day, he was fired for making these remarks. Here we see another point touched on by de Maistre, the fact that a regime filled with mediocrities can just sort of meander along, committing all sorts of evils, so long as God tolerates it for some greater purpose of His. There is no logical reason this man should have a significant job of any kind, much less be put on television to dispense wisdom. Matthew Dowd was the chief strategist for the Bush campaign in 2004. Now he's spouting nonsense to the deranged wine aunts and dog mums who watch MSNBC, in theory to offer insight into current events, but in actuality revealing how clueless he and those around him actually are. In his imagination, untouched by updates since the mid-2000s, he represents a class of people who have the moral authority and cultural power to police thoughts and speech. He still believes he lives under the total hegemonic liberalism of his youth, and that violations of the norms of the regime to which he debases himself are deserving of censure, ruin, and even death. Charlie Kirk was living proof that that world is coming to a rapid end. He was only 31 when he was killed, but in his abbreviated career, one can see a rapid evolution, in real time, of the course of conservative politics in the West. When he first came on the scene, Kirk was very much in the normicon mould, emerging as he did out of the Tea Party and the Republican establishment. He was for low taxes and Israel, and could come up with lots of great reasons for more immigration. In many ways, he was more of a libertarian than a social conservative, famously getting attacked by groypers for his pairing up in media appearances with a gay black man. But as with so many others in that publicly acceptable conservative sphere, something started happening in the later years of the first Trump administration. You can see it with Matt Walsh, you can see it with Glenn Beck. There's a sharp turn to the right, not in the sense of becoming more conservative, but embracing views that would mark one as beyond liberalism. Walsh, noting the controversy over his evolving stance on burning the flag, has outright said that he doesn't believe a lot of what he did in 2019, and that he's embraced some quite illiberal views. There's a hardening with many of these guys, personalities who people like me used to deride as cucks and sellouts. I would never say that now, and looking back, I'm sorry I ever did. I should be clear about two things here. First, there's a kind of snobbery on the right where those of us who read de Bonald and Gomez de Vila and Guénon look down on conservative populists and popularizers like Kirk. Some of this comes from authentic and reasonable criticism of the self-aggrandizing, the commercialization, and the opportunism one could attribute to normicondom. Some of it is genuine disagreement with civic nationalist ideology. But of course, some of it is simply jealousy. At the same time, it would be a mistake to call Charlie Kirk a man of the right as such, a mistake made by many in the media. More on that in a moment. He and the others certainly were and are moving in that direction, but in the end, Kirk was very much a right liberal. But it doesn't matter, especially much in the big scheme of things. We all have our role to play in events, the scope of which, as de Maistre also notes, is determined by that same providence that ultimately orders all human life. Some, like Kirk, are given tremendous energy and charisma, and are able to make themselves known to millions. Others of us are destined for a, hopefully, quiet anonymity, communicating our ideas to a few thousand readers and a few dozen students. Some will know no audience larger than a loving family. Some of us will pass from the world with our thoughts unknown and unremembered. It's the nature of our existence. But whatever you think of people like Kirk, and I'm sure I'll get lots of idiot comments denouncing his support for Israel and his lack of white nationalist sensibilities, etc., know that his enemies are yours. The people celebrating his death online don't draw any of the nuanced distinctions I've been writing about here. For the liberal establishment and their leftist attack dogs, there are no normicons, no right liberals, no well-meaning traditionalists. There are only Nazis, and there's only one thing they deserve. Kirk truly believed in that old liberal trope, the marketplace of ideas. He believed that most people were rational political actors, that when confronted with hard facts and reasonable arguments, people could be persuaded to see the light. It's easy to be cynical about this, to ascribe wholly mercenary motives to his quest for notoriety, or to accuse him of bullying 18-year-olds with canned talking points. But I think that would be unfair. There was always an earnestness to Kirk. Paradoxically, for a man who dropped out of tertiary education, his whole persona was bound up with the notion that the universities were the proving ground of truth. More than anything, he was a college Republican, without the college, or, arguably, the Republican. He probably spent more time on campuses than any other person who refused to be educated at one. Despite never graduating, university life made him what he was. Ultimately, for all his criticism of the institution, he clung to that liberal concept of the life of the mind that only a college could foster. He followed that reverence to his own demise. What lessons can we draw from this? First, I urge everyone on the right to understand, if you don't already, that the battle we face is, fundamentally, a spiritual one. Sometimes this is hard to grasp, as political or racial or sexual elements can seem so much more obvious. But behind it all, at the deepest level, is a contest between the affirmation and rejection of the divine in human life. Sometimes, however, we are blessed to see it foregrounded in a particularly clear way. The author included a screenshot of an article from September 8, 2025, in the online publication Jezebel. The article is titled, "We Paid Some Etsy Witches to Curse Charlie Kirk." The subtitle reads, quote, "If the far-right misogynist with a bad haircut wants to villainize independent women, Jezebel is more than happy to be the hag of his nightmares." End of quote. They think it's funny, of course. We'll call ourselves Jezebel after the demon-worshipping foreign queen from the Bible we didn't read, because Dad made me go to VBS once, and I still hate him for that. From that and the other elements, one can see, less a political than a religious worldview emerge. A hag is a monstrous perversion of femininity that devours children. A witch is a malign spiritual force that plagues a community. To them and those like them, on one level, it's all just a kind of joke. But in their earnest rejection of the worldview that shuns these things, they end up instantiating them. After all, their most important priority is the slaughter of children, and their highest political goal is liberation from the laws of God and man, from nature itself. They didn't curse Charlie Kirk because they didn't like what he said. The people who wished him dead weren't hoping that he would otherwise come around to their worldview. He was a totem, a hate symbol onto which they projected their own vices, their hatred, malice, envy, rage, misery, and ultimately, their despair. Kirk was a self-made man married to a literal beauty queen, the father of 2 children, happy, famous, and beloved, by all accounts a man of faith. the decadent liberal ruling class, and the twisted, degenerate leftist mutants who serve as their agents of violence, can't imagine a world where someone like that is happy, and they are not. To them, Kirk's very existence represented a repudiation of their entire worldview. In their perverse judgment, his being free and alive was an injustice. He wasn't threatened with murder for owning too many libs with his based arguments. He was merely a more conspicuous version of the normal and healthy humanity they wished to destroy. The same people who hated him hate you, fellow rightists. If they haven't come after you yet, it's because they don't yet know about you personally. When they do, when they can put a face to a name to a class enemy, they will pursue your destruction with relentless fury. It's not a conspiracy. It's just the inevitable outcome of a worldview driven by an insatiable resentment, the sort de Maistre recognized as the animating force behind the guillotine. They have a lot of advantages, not least of which is a reckless hatred immune to reason or mercy. You have families and work and things to lose. Many of these people have wholly surrendered themselves to the full-time pursuit of your destruction. But still, we have the upper hand. Because, in their arrogance and ignorance, they don't really know who we are. Returning to that Jezebel headline for a moment, there's something else that stands out. They refer to Charlie Kirk as far right. That's not hyperbole. In their view, Kirk is the leading edge of American fascism. That, and perhaps a comment section run-ins with some dim but flamboyant wingnats, constitutes the entirety of their awareness of what the right actually is. They think Charlie Kirk is extreme. You read that right, so to speak. For them, people like Kirk and Walsh and Knowles and Stephen Crowder and Donald Trump represent the furthest and most committed extent of rightism. They have no idea what's out there. They still don't understand that the people I just listed, for all of their differences, represent not the actual right, but a rearguard conservative reflex, still with one foot planted in the liberal norms of yore. The people who support them. The normal people who listen to their broadcasts and attend their college shows and vote for them, and those like them, do so because those people give them hope that coexistence is still possible. Owning the libs isn't fascism. Owning the libs is liberalism. Killing the man who does this only demonstrates to people who would prefer not to know it that the hope that Charlie Kirk and his ilk held out is no longer viable, if it ever was. It won't be everyone, of course, and I myself truly hope that the reaction to this is one of love. I prefer to believe that enough of Kirk's enemies will see reason and purge the great evil from their midst. I am friends with people who disagree with me politically. I come from a generation where that was not only possible, but common. But I understand that this belief is not founded on anything rational, at least in human terms. Miracles are possible, but they are, at this point, the only thing that will turn this around. It's the youngest people who are going to be most affected by this. I teach kids, and Kirk's murder was a topic of conversation in every class today, of their initiative. The truly heartbreaking video for me, even more so than the shooting, was the clip people posted of Kirk's little daughter running up to him from backstage at an appearance. As the father of 2 daughters myself, I can only imagine the pain his wife must feel, and the terrible duty of explaining to them why their father will never come home. The author included a video of Charlie Kirk sitting on a sofa on the set of a television program. His young daughter, who is initially off stage, runs up to him, exclaiming, "Hi, Daddy," as Charlie hugs her. That family is suffering tonight. The people who inflicted that suffering on them are no doubt taking some perversion of joy in the fact that they've inflicted this pain on others. Many more share that sentiment. They think, because suffering is awful, that it is necessarily crippling, as the suffering they imagine they experience from the world, not validating them, renders them incapable of productive, healthy human life. But once more, they fail to understand. They don't know Aeschylus. They never read Edith Hamilton's beautiful rendering of his masterful Agamemnon. I've quoted it before, but it bears repeating. The author included a black and white graphic with a stone bust of a bearded figure. It reads, quote, "He who learns must suffer. And even in our sleep pain, which cannot forget, falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." End of quote. It is attributed to Aeschylus from the play Agamemnon. The author included a video clip of Robert F. Kennedy's remarks following the assassination of Martin Luther King, Jr. Quote, "I have bad news for you, for all of our fellow citizens and people who love peace all over the world, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and killed tonight. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice for his fellow human beings, and he died because of that effort." In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it is perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those of you who are black, considering the evidence there evidently is that there were white people who were responsible, you can be filled with bitterness, with hatred, and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in great polarization. Black people amongst black, white people amongst white, filled with hatred toward one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and to replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that has spread across our land, with an effort to understand with compassion and love. For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and distrust at the injustice of such an act against all white people, I can only say that I feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to go beyond these rather difficult times. My favorite poet was Aeschylus. He wrote, "In our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until, in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or they be black. So I shall ask you tonight to return home, to say a prayer for the family of Martin Luther King. That's true, but more importantly to say a prayer for our own country, which all of us love, a prayer for understanding and that compassion of which I spoke. We can do well in this country. We will have difficult times. We've had difficult times in the past. We will have difficult times in the future. It is not the end of violence. It is not the end of lawlessness. It is not the end of disorder. But the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all human beings who abide in our land. Let us dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Let us dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and for our people. End of quote. Suffering is awful. No one wants it, and no one likes to hear that it is necessary, least of all someone enduring it, and only slightly less the person offering that counsel. But it is in any case inevitable, our feelings about it notwithstanding. We suffer because we are alienated from God, and live in a fallen world, and because our pride would otherwise conceal from us the remembrance of our weakness and mortality. God teaches us through suffering. Through suffering, we learn. Through suffering, we master ourselves. There is strength in suffering and wisdom, knowledge of self and of others. Nothing worthwhile occurs without it. It's natural to hate it. It's supernatural to transcend it. De Maistre believed that the French Revolution was God's salutary chastisement inflicted on the French people, who in his view had abandoned transcendent values long before the Revolution. The modern right, though it draws from older sources, first takes shape from the lessons learned from that period of suffering. In our own day, the managerial regime under which we live in the West, the system that, through its media mouthpieces, declared a green light on Charlie Kirk, is increasingly nakedly tyrannical. We will learn again the lessons that de Maistre did, or we will perish. As a Christian, I'm hopeful for the former. The crew at Jezebel, and those like them, have forgotten how the story of their namesake ended. King Ahab was the anointed of God, but in his weakness forgot the Lord and favoured the gods of his foreign wife. Jezebel could not abide the truth spoken to her by the prophets of Israel, so she murdered them. But not Elijah. God spared him to suffer. He fled to the wilderness, where he prayed and fasted, attended by ravens, his leisure consisting solely of his lamentations for his people's lack of faith. But the desert hardened him. He became something the civilized people no longer recognized. He summoned her priests to Mount Carmel, where the God of his fathers demonstrated his power over Baal and Asheroth, Elijah's very altar devoured by divine flames, before Elijah led the people in destroying the men who'd led their nation astray. A prophet is a Navi, a prophetess in the Septuagint, one who overflows. It was the suffering that emptied him in preparation for God filling him beyond even his human capacity. Jezebel's husband was killed in battle, her son slain by rebels led by Jehu, and as Elijah had prophesied, on the new king's orders, her own eunuch servants pitched her from her palace window, still dressed in her regalia, to smash into the street below. There the stray dogs tore her to pieces, and her end was to be consumed as she had consumed others. God's justice was done. No one knows who lurks in the modern wilderness. Perhaps in the end, it's no one. Perhaps our sins as a nation are too great, and we have not yet endured what we must. Perhaps this will blow over and we can have our semblance of peace for a while longer. But I am not the only one who hears the whispers from the desert. I'm not the only one who can imagine what it might be. Something great and terrible. Something that will pain us to witness and pain us more to join or contest it. It will be something we, in our comfort and indolence, cannot yet fathom. Some kind of sublime and awful reckoning approaches. And whatever it is, no one can stop what's coming. That concludes No One Can Stop What's Coming, an article from September 11th, 2025, in the publication The Library of Celaeno.